4th and 13. I don't Mullen. For the ones that don't know, he was really late to his post game conference rather, and he kept it short and sweet like he does after every loss. He didn't say much. We'll evaluate this. He said he went with a hot hand starting at AR after the LSU game. So that was that. And also another thing that I forgot to mention, Florida sings the alma mater after every single game, win or lose. There was only like a handful of like 4 or 5 players that went over by the band and sung the alma mater. Pouncey was one, Carter was one, Braun was one, and there was another player that's say what you want, have your opinion. That's not a good look. Especially for a guy like Dan Mullen that always has an opinion and always wants to run his mouth when things are good, but then when things aren't going well, you're a complete opposite. Again, I'm always consistent. Whatever you are in life, just be consistent. If you're going to constantly run your mouth when you're winning and when you're losing. If you're humble, always be humble. And Dan Mullen hasn't. He wants to run his mouth and say a lot of things when the program's going good and cool. I don't have an issue with that. But if you look at every loss Florida's had, keeps his answers very brief with the media, especially when they want to question him about quarterback or a game plan or position players, whatever. I don't exactly agree with that. Endless Adventures drops. Pretty much the Kentucky game exactly. Yeah, a little bit. Only thing that was different was Florida had a lead in the first half. Florida couldn't do anything offensively this game. They were shut out. Richardson makes a couple boneheaded plays, which is expected from a freshman. That Kirby Smart said this after the game. You can outcoach coaches, but you can't outcoach recruiting. And I kind of want to segue into recruiting specifically with Florida fans. You could definitely see that Georgia, no pun intended here, but Georgia just has more dogs. If you look at, you can just go, you go through all their starters and you can go to their backups, and the backups are still just as good as the starters. And Florida doesn't have that right now. And I want to go with this. I was listening to the Sports Den, James Coleman and Denny Thompson. Denny Thompson trains quarterbacks in Jacksonville. James Coleman, he contributes sometimes to Florida State's channel here at the Voice of College Football. And Denny Thompson was talking about Florida fans have too much of an expectation on what Florida should be doing in recruiting. And I'll explain it like this. And I know just a tidbit. And guys, please drop any comments on what your opinion is on Florida's recruiting. Florida is so far behind in facilities, and it's not even close. Again, you're watching the Gators Final Report. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Dylan Denmark, host of On the Mark with Denmark. Florida is so far behind in football facilities. Just think about this stat. There are 65 Power 5 teams, okay? 65 of them. That's the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Pac-12, okay? Of those 65 teams in the Big 5, the Power 5, about 57 of them, I'll just say 60, have a football-only facility. You know one of those teams that doesn't have a football-only facility? The University of Florida. That's number one. Number two, Florida was way behind in getting a football indoor facility. They got that in 2014 when everybody else who Florida's expected to compete with, Alabama, the Georgias, they all got theirs before Florida. If you look at what Georgia has and Alabama has, what Florida's expected to compete with, they have their facilities to rehab their players better, to get treatment for their players with anything. Florida has some of it, but not to the extent of Alabama and Georgia. There was Denny Thompson was talking about Georgia and Alabama. They'll have a brand new facility that was just finished 2 years ago, and they're already redoing that facility right now because the technology that was used for that facility was old, and they need to redo it because that's the same thing with technology. Just like an iPhone, for example. The iPhone. I have the 12. Of course, the iPhone 12 is not the same as the iPhone 8. That's why you have to stay up to date. That's why people want it. And Florida has to get up to date with those facilities. Another thing, you're talking to 17 and 18-year-olds. And when they go on these official trips, they wear the full uniform. When you go to Georgia and Alabama, they go on the field. They have the lights set up all kind of cool ways to get photographers. They get the pictures. You know what Florida has? Florida has an outdated locker room, and they take pictures behind a green screen. Think about that. Florida is an outdated locker room behind a green screen. They get one picture like this, like a camera I have here. Click, that's it. Or on your iPhone. And Alabama, Georgia are doing way cool things. And I know it's just a little thing, but I mean, we're talking about 17 and 18-year-olds. And 17 and 18-year-olds care about what's cool. And when you have those little things, I'm just talking about a little bit of stuff. And I'm just talking about, like I said, what the Sports Den said with Denny Thompson and James Coleman. And they're around these athletes. They don't recruit these athletes. They work with them. Denny Thompson trains quarterbacks. He trained Anthony Richardson. He trains Carson Beck at Georgia. Among the few trains guys that are in college and pro. But that was just a little bit of what he was talking about. And I'll add this too. Georgia's getting all of these guys. They're nationally recruiting. And Florida's not doing that well in state. Now, I know Dan Mullen will always say, well, these guys they weren't on our list and yada, yada, yada. And that's fine. You can explain that any way you want, Coach. But if you look at the state, it used to be in the 90s, because I know there will be adults. I don't know about what you guys, your opinion is, but there will be guys that will say, and some boosters will say, well, Spurrier didn't need this. Bow didn't need it at Florida State. If you want to talk about Florida State, because Florida State is kind of in the same vicinity with Florida when it comes to facilities. And they built their indoor facility pretty much at the same time as Florida did. Florida, if you look in state, what was in the 90s, there was no FAU, there was no UCF, there was no FIU, and if they were just starting to become something. USF's another one. So all of those recruits that would be walk-ons that could go to Florida State, Miami, well, they're not going to go walk on to Florida anymore because they could start day one at one of those schools. So, and that's something that Bowden and Spurrier didn't have to deal with. And you always have to stay up to date. You have to stay up to date with social media. Dan Mullen stays up to the game with the social media. I don't know how much more Norvell is and Manny Diaz. It doesn't look like Manny Diaz is going to stay at Miami much longer. But that's just a few of the things that you have to worry about recruiting. And Florida doesn't have all of the resources that Alabama and Georgia have. And people expect every signing day for Florida to be right with an Alabama and to be right with a Georgia. And that's just not fair. I'm not saying that's just my opinion. And Florida's way behind on that. And I mean, you guys can let me know in the comments section. But I want to go back to this, and I'm going to talk with Pat Dooley one day. It won't be, in the next couple of weeks. I want to wait after football season. Think about this for a moment. If you could go back in time to when Florida dominated football and basketball, okay? Florida wins a national title in January of 2007. Let's take a step back. They win a national they win the national title in basketball in April of 2007, April of 2006, January of 2007. They won the football national title for Ohio State, and then they beat Oklahoma in January of 2009. 4 national titles in a span of 2 years. What did Florida do with that? And anybody that has a comment, please let me know.